What does craftsmanship mean to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I would say craftsmanship to me means following inspiration with a with trying to allow a minimum amount of external influences inhibit that inspiration. Not sure if that makes any sense. And by external influences, I like to think of you know, uh, what are other people going to think? What does your, if it's a customer job, what are they going to like? And that's not quite correct, but it it's you have a vision in your mind of what you think the thing is you're trying to create, and you're trying to not let that be excessively influenced by all these external forces. At the same time, trying to come up with trying to make sure the result is something that will have a wide appeal. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Um, which external forces?
Well, by that I mean there's always limitations, of materials and limitations of working conditions, and then of course there's time element. How much time can you put into something? And you can't ignore all those things because they have an effect on a bottom line. But I suppose in an ideal world, none of those things are of concern to you. So maybe a good example is there's a really well-known boat builder in my area named Greg Foster. He's of that sort of back to the lander hippie generation. So he's in his 80s now.
Mhm.
And there's some point at which I think 20, 25 years ago, he just stopped having direct dealings with customers. He just decided that he didn't want a customer influencing his decisions about what he's building. And so he just somehow he's managed to sort of just do spec boats, things that he's interested in without any worries about what someone else is going to be thinking about them. And the boats he builds are just um like out of this world. They're very traditional, or at least they're based heavily in historic tradition of the often love the sort of Elizabethan era in Britain. Anyway, so he sort of exemplifies what craftsmanship is to me, just sort of like I'm doing this thing and I don't give a shit what anybody else thinks about it.
So is that almost a balance between craftsmanship and art?
Um, no, well, I don't separate the craftsmanship to me 100% involves art. I think, at its highest level, craftsmanship and art are on the same plane. And we tend to separate those two things for some reason. And I've always felt like, yeah, at its best, they are the same. And I think there's a point in our human history where we decided that they're somehow different. And I don't know exactly when that was. I mean, if we go back to say, the Middle Ages or something like that, or maybe the time of Da Vinci or Michelangelo or whatever, they were craftsmen, right? A lot of what they did to earn a buck. And we think of them as artists, like they're operating on a different level. But I mean, there's very little of what they did that they weren't doing because someone was paying them or they needed to pay the bills, right? So, and then we sort of have come to develop this idea that craft is the thing you do with your hands in order to earn a living. But you stop once it only exists in the world of like functional objects, and I don't think that's quite the same. I think craftsmanship is an attitude towards working with materials to produce a thing that perhaps it's functional, but at its best is also beautiful, also artful. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I've always, I went to an arts school, an arts college, and yeah, there was always sort of this there's a bit of it always been a bit of a division between art and craft, in that art supposedly just was all about vision and producing generally something that's either like a two-dimensional representation of some vision, or perhaps there's some other medium that's being incorporated, sound or uh, video or whatever. And then craft is like the always like fabrics or ceramics or woodworking or something like that. And there's like this hard line between the two that is imposed by the art scene and the museum scene and stuff like that. And I've always objected to that, because I've always felt like the people in the craft side had as much artistic integrity as the people on the art side, except they felt like they could apply all this, their desires to produce beauty and produce something functional. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah.
yeah, and on the art side, it's like, well, it hangs there. You need to dedicate some space to it, but otherwise, there's it's not going to do anything for you. I've always kind of like William Morris. I liked his attitude that he was able to take art and craft and combine them into improving your life through objects of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
If that
Mm-hmm.
makes if, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, so what took you from art school into craftsmanship? What was that change?
Well,
Or into woodworking, I should say.
I mean, I've always my dad was a mechanical engineer, so all through, I literally grew up playing underneath this drafting board behind me. That was my dad's drafting board when he was
Oh, wow.
working.
Wow.
And literally he worked from home for a stretch. He had lost his job somewhere when I was a little kid, in my, I don't know how old I was, 5 or 6 or 8 or something like that. And he started working from home. So there was a lot of time where he was sort of wrangling myself and I guess my brother, and so we'd just be farting around in his like basement office space, and I'd be sitting at that drafting board, drawing trucks or something like that, his, templates and things like that. And so I always when we got into school and we had like shop class, always took a shop class, because it was just the world I grew up in. We did everything, if something needed building, we built it. If something needed fixing, we fixed it. So I always took shop classes, and then when I went to Ontario College of Art, stuck with that idea. I studied both. I took like industrial design as a major, kind of following my dad's footsteps a little bit. Worked for him as a draftsman as a teenager and stuff like that in his office. And so that world of mechanical building things was always there on my shoulder. But I always knew from as a little kid, right from the start, that I was an artist as well. Like, that was, if there was anything I could clearly understand from the
Mm-hmm.
moment I could conceive of being an artist as a career path, it was there. That followed me all the way through high school. I went to an arts-based high school where we did art half the day, and also took the whatever shop classes were available there,
Oh, wow.
and then moved on to the Ontario College of Art. Again, sort of half the bulk of the program was sort of pure regular art development skills, but I also took industrial design. I also took whatever metal and woodworking plastics shop classes were available. And and so I had envisioned industrial designer as a career path, which I did do when I got out of school. I did work as an industrial designer, freelance mostly. Um, but I'd also gotten interested in boat building at that time too. More out of as an artistic expression than as a career. And so I was doing sort of sculptural stuff that involved boat imagery.
And was that separate from the industrial design
Yeah,
that you're doing
yeah, that
freelance?
was so the industrial design was purely, making money, working on product design or also working as a commercial artist or like artist for hire.
It sounds like you were self-employed. You had your first business right out of college.
Yeah, I've only ever had like I think 5 jobs, like
Oh wow.
five like punch a clock jobs in my life, and none of them lasted more than 6 months.
Yeah, yeah. How were you finding work when you first got out of college and went off on your own? How did you,
That's always been tough. Um, I don't know. You pick up little bits and pieces here and there. I mean, most of the times I've gone looking for a job, I've been unsuccessful in
hmm,
finding one.
hmm,
Uh,
interesting.
so it's always been, I don't look for jobs, I look for work. I look
Hmm.
for things that need doing. And, um, and I've tried like throwing up posters on the bulletin board at boat docks and stuff like that, hoping to get a bit of business. That's never worked. I've tried running ads in magazines and stuff like that. That's never worked. It's always been kind of word of mouth primarily that has
Yeah.
worked. And I think, and getting my name out there by other means. So, I had a shop for a while on Granville Island in Vancouver. Is For those people who don't know that, it's sort of it's like Vancouver's version of the Pike Street Market in Seattle. So it's very tourist heavy with lots of, food stalls and vendors and tchotchke shops and stuff like that. And the one in Vancouver is sort of unique in that it's got a working boatyard built into it, and it's got a few other sort of very like industry oriented things that are kind of holdovers from the island. Used to be an industrial space. And so there's still like an active machine shop in there that has nothing to do with the public. The doors are not open to the public to come and look at it. You can peek through the windows, but that's it. And
Yeah.
so there's a handful of things like that on Granville Island. And so we were able to sort of piggyback on that as a workspace, but it gave us great exposure. We had tons of people coming in the door. I shared the shop with Rob Morris of Brewery Creek Boats, which is he made a name for himself. He's got a book out there on building skin on frame boats, which I sort of I've got elements of that book that I contributed
Oh, cool.
to.
So, what was the moment in time that you decided that industrial design wasn't it, and boat building was going to be your direction?
Oh yeah, that's been easy. So I started building canoes for myself. I got interested in boat building. I I hit my library, and they're pre-internet at this point, right? And so they only had like 2 books on boat building in the library, and I think it was John Leather's book. You wouldn't necessarily know that, but I can't even remember. Just called Clinker Boat Building, and it was like way too in depth for me. And it's from a you don't know how to build a boat perspective. It's almost useless because it's heavy on text, very few illustrations. And another one called Building the Jawbone Kayak, which was picture heavy, and it was building a simple skin on frame kayak, a fuselage style kayak. So meaning you make like ring frames, you connect them together with battens, and then you throw a canvas skin on the whole thing. Very clunky, but that was my first boat, and I managed to produce it in a reasonable amount of time. Procrastinated a lot on it. And then But once I got that under my belt and I got out and was using it, and it was like, awesome. I'm out paddling this thing that I created. It didn't paddle great, but it was okay. And I was starting to get interested in the boat building, and Wooden Boat Magazine had an article about building these lapstrake canoes, these solo plywood, glued plywood canoes. And that seemed like just the ticket. I was really into canoeing and I wanted to go on canoe trips with friends, but my friends would always bail out on me on doing anything longer than a couple of days. So this article talked about these solo canoes, and these are like indigenous to the Adirondack region back in the 1800s. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like these are double paddle canoes, so you get use a kayak paddle in them, which
Okay.
which seemed like a great option. In Ontario, can get really windy out there, and so having a smaller boat that you can control, paddle like a kayak, seemed like
Hmm.
a better way to deal with wind than slugging it away with ugh, ugh. and and I just everything about them seemed right. Lightweight, accessible to build. And so I started building one of those and I loved it. I got through the project quickly. I found a book on the subject by a guy named Tom Hill called Ultralight Boat Building. And when I got that one done, I immediately wanted one that was going to paddle a little bit easier, be a little bit longer, and 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 so I designed a 15-foot version of the one I'd built. One day I started working on that boat, and like I started in the morning, and 18 hours later I decided to go to bed, and it was like that was the day I was just so invested in building this thing, and the time flew by. I didn't even notice it. And I was like, I want to do this all the time. And so that's when I decided I was going to go into boat building. The idea of building things by myself, just one at a time, really appealed to me. The idea of building something that was more sculptural really appealed to me. And I like the idea of producing something that was sculptural that was practical. So that's the craftsman part of it. Um, and so wooden boats really appealed from that all those perspectives. So I decided to start invest. I thought if I was going to do this, I should a try and maybe get some training. And there were, I think that I was at like one Toronto had like some real rinky-dink little boat show, and I remember one guy that was there who had just gotten out of a boat building school somewhere, and he was saying, now that I'm out, I got to try and earn a living. And I think I might have grabbed his name. His name was Peter Code. Now, I don't remember if he was the guy I saw at the boat show, but he was the only boat builder I knew a name for, and I don't remember even how I knew that. But I called him up and asked his advice about getting into boat building, and he suggested I go to the place he went to go to school was Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and so he suggested that, and so I decided to apply to boat building schools rather than just try and jump into it on my own. I thought I didn't want to pigeonhole myself to just mess around with little canoes and kayak type things. I wanted to be able to sort of take it up to another level. So I applied there. I applied to the Lyme Regis School in Britain. I applied to the Lowesoft School in Britain.
Did you stay self-employed while going to school to
Well, I was Canadian in America. I couldn't work
Oh,
while at school. But I had the money to
okay.
not have to work while I was there, so that was all right. I mean, I lived very modestly.
Did you end up going to those other colleges after, or
No,
did you go straight into boat building
no. When I
afterwards?
got out, I felt like I had the grounding that I needed.
Okay.
They did a really good job of giving me the basics, and I just went right into boat building. One of my classmates was also Canadian, and he lived in Vancouver on Bowen Island, which is like kind of bedroom community of Vancouver on an island. And so I went over to stayed with him for about a month. He wanted to build a small boat, so we got started on that. But he had a previous education as a stringed instrument builder, and he was way too fussy for me. I couldn't take it. And so I was just like, oh man, come on, let's get a move on here, right?
Too fussy for a boat builder.
Yeah,
That's saying
exactly.
something.
Ironically, and now I build stringed instruments for as a hobby, right? So
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's great. So what? How did you make your first dollar boat building?
um, actually, I don't even think it was. I mean, well, he was paying me a little bit to help him,
Okay.
but not much. I don't remember what it was. But I as our relationship on that project kind of soured a little bit. I mean, we didn't have a
Mm.
personal souring. It was just kind of like I got sick of the slow pace of things, and I was like, I got to get out of here and do something different. Um, I went over to Vancouver and started casting about, like trying to find ways of making a living. And let me think. It's all a bit foggy in my head. I took that old pickup truck and I built like a camper onto it, like a real hillbilly plywood box of a camper. I was like, one of the early van lifers, if you want to call it that. It was like a plywood box with like the fiberglass cap on top.
Oh,
It
that's
was like
great.
ridiculously tall, and I had like one of my canoes that I built in Toronto strapped on one side, and I had built a skin on frame kayak at boat school on like in the evenings, and I had that strapped on the other side. So there were like two big like torpedo torpedoes strapped to either side of this car. So
Every
I got
town's got one of those guys.
totally, yeah. So I'd be driving along and these things are like bouncing off the side. I couldn't put them on the top because
Oh
it was
my god.
way too tall, so I had them slung down below the roof racks. And so I ended up on Granville Island, and I managed to get myself a job working, helping a guy carve a totem pole. They've got this carver's shed there, and First Nations artists would get access to that shed for, you know, various lengths of time for whatever projects they had. And so there was a guy named Clarence Mills who was working on a totem pole, and I was just watching him carve. And this guy comes along. He was uh, French or French Canadian. Couldn't recall exactly which. Couldn't tell by the accent at the time. But he asked Clarence if he needed any help. And Clarence looked him up and down, and you could tell he didn't think a lot of this guy. And this guy, I think this guy had been over at Emily Carr Art College, which is on the island itself, on Granville Island as well. And so he said to the guy, all right, well, come show me your tools. Right. And so the guy goes away. Um, and he's off getting his carving tools. And while he's gone, I said to Clarence, are you actually looking for help? And he's like, well, maybe. I said, you want me to show you my tools? And he said, all right. And so I went off to my truck to pull out the tools that I had at my disposal. So this guy comes back and he's got like a little tool roll with a whole bunch of dinky little gouges and stuff like that, like you would use for doing like a little woodcut or something like that. I come back and I had like a boat builder slick that was like, with a blade like 2 feet long and a lipped adze, and I had a roll of larger size gouges and things like that. So I had a pretty good complement of tools, a handful of, I think I even had a couple of like West Coast carving knives as already. And so he looked at my stuff and he was, okay, I think you probably know how to do something useful for me. And so for the next few months, I worked for him um, on that pole on this 20, 24 foot totem pole.
Wow.
It was about 2 feet around or something like that. And it, he would always show up late I would always show up early. And so we worked out this relationship where he would sort of block out stuff that he needed done, and I would show up in the morning and get that stuff done. A lot of sort of smoothing off large areas or removing large amounts of material, and he would show up later. Then we'd get into the detail work together and stuff like that. And so that poll was for one of the going to the customer was, I think he was the vice president of the East Vancouver chapter of the Hells Angels.
Oh,
And we were way behind schedule, and that made me very nervous, right? This guy was
you're
in
right.
yeah, this guy wouldn't show up on his bike or anything wearing colors, but he'd roll up in a Mercedes with like a flamboyant Hawaiian shirt and a trophy wife on his arm, and
Oh my gosh.
if he was an intimidating character. As nice as he was being, like you just knew like there was another side of him that you did not want to be on, and I was like routinely being, he'd roll up and I'm there and Clarence is not. And he's like, what's going on with the pole? And he had Clarence doing some other stuff for him, like some gold jewelry and stuff, because Clarence also did like gold carving and silver carving. And I was kind of like, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's like Clarence isn't here.
Oh my
I have to
gosh.
talk to Clarence. Don't show up before noon. That's anyway. It all worked out. It all worked out quite well in the end.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So you
so,
started building a
but
totem pole, and how did that then lead to some boat work?
yeah, that's
Was
good. Well, that was just, it was paying the bills. And I kept looking around for work. I met another boat builder named Tony Grove, who we're still friends. He had a shop in North Vancouver, and so I appealed to him for a job, and he couldn't help me out, but we developed this great relationship. He was just here a couple of days ago. Um, but I know what I ended up getting a call from a guy in Surrey, which is a city south of Vancouver. And he had actually called Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building looking for someone to help him at his shop. He was an old shipwright that worked for forestry for his whole career and then set up on his own. And he was looking for somebody to help him with projects. And he got my name from them and he called me, I think. Anyway, I went and worked for him for about, another 6 months, my 6 month window before
yeah.
I get itchy feet. And he put me on the job doing all of his wooden boat repair work and sort of showed me a few tricks along the way here and there, mostly left me to my own concerns. And we were mostly working on like large wooden power boats, like Chris Craft type things,
Yeah. Yeah.
doing structural repairs primarily. Um, well, a funny little story is I showed up there for like a job interview, and there
Mhm.
was him, Ed is his name, Ed McGeechee, and his son Dean, Dean was 30s something, I guess, or maybe early 40s, and he had like a separate side business doing like mostly repairs of like aluminum boats, like warranty repair work for like
Mhm.
Lund and a couple different boat manufacturers. So they come in and he's basically replacing rivets that had loosened up on these boats. And they're working out of a residence. They had like a double car garage that Dean was in, and then they had like a whole bunch of outbuildings on like it was a 2 acre lot. I show up and Ed comes walking out and he's wearing these gray overalls, like your typical mechanics overalls, right? With his name Ed on there. And then Dean comes walking out in gray overalls and he's got his name Dean on there. And I'm thinking, there is no public showing up at this place. And you two jokers who are father and son each have to have your own names or else. I just thought that was the weirdest thing.
Oh my gosh. That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway, it was good. We had great times having these long coffee breaks. Or Ed's mother, she was like in her 90s, Scottish, would make us scones every day, and scones and tea, and Ed would regale me with stories of being a shipwright through the 1950s and 60s and stuff like that. He actually apprenticed with Chris Craft.
Wow.
Chris Craft used to have a dealership in Vancouver, and they would have repair shipwrights working there to just do small sort of fix-it jobs on whatever boats uh, came in, or were they used to have some slips for customers to dock their boats there who would commute back and forth across the inlet from Vancouver to North Vancouver. So anyway, Ed, that was 49 Degrees Marine Systems. That was my first boat building job, and I stuck around there for a good long time until I was just like really itching to build new boats, and it was never going to happen with Ed. So I parted with him and started hung out my own shingle as Nomad Boatbuilding. That was 1999,
Nice.
and moved into that shop on Granville Island with the with the friend who Rob Morris, who he had already had the shop, and he met me while I was working on the totem pole. He saw me driving off the island with those boats flying off the side of my truck, and he pulled a U-turn and chased me down because he built skin-on-frame boats, and I had this skin-on-frame kayak on the side. It's like, and like those were very, very, very rare to see anybody with something like that at that time.
Yeah.
And so we developed a great relationship, great working relationship where we had our businesses were independent, but we collaborated a lot with teaching.
Mm.
Mostly Rob was writing his book at the time and working another job. So he was out of the shop a lot, and he would find himself stuck needing to sort of keep his business was all teaching people to build skin on frame boats. And so he would
Okay.
be like, I can't make it in today. Can you take care of keeping my client working for the day? And
So
so
the
just
teaching part of your.
by
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
osmosis, I was picking up his teaching style. And so it got so that he could call me and say, I need you to pick up where I left off on this boat. And I could walk in and the client would be there and I would look at where they're at on the boat. And I knew exactly what needed to get done on that boat before the end of the day in order to stay on the schedule. He had a 5-day build schedule, start to finish, boat ready
Wow.
for paint in 5 days from raw materials.
Wow.
And so it just got like it was like seamless. I could step in at any moment and carry on with one of his clients, or I could start a project off and he could step in. And so we ended up working together a bunch and an opportunity came up for us to go up to the Arctic to teach skin on frame building in a northern community called Kugaruk, which is if you went to the top of Hudson's Bay and hung a left and went a couple inlets in, there's you find Kugaruk way the hell up there. It's a tiny little traditional community, not very many, like 400 people maybe, and
Wow.
about 55% of those would be like kids under 12. And so we got to work with several elders and some youth. We had like the youth could interpret for us, and we had a dedicated interpreter. The elders, none of them spoke English, or they'd have a word or two here or there that they could understand a little bit more than you might realize, but they didn't. They almost never used a single word of English while we were with them, and so it was an incredible experience working with them. They had a very specific style of kayak that Rob and I had only built like maybe one or two examples of, and we had never seen one in real life such that we had like all the details of its construction. We had drawings of a couple original boats, and so there's a bit of interpretation that we had to work with. And so while working with these guys, they'd never really built boats in their lives themselves, but their parents had. Like these guys are in their 70s. And so when they were kids, they were living in their lifetimes, they were still living in traditional sealskin and caribou skin clothing when they were young kids. And their parents were still using kayaks as a means of transportation when they were
Wow.
young kids. Um, And so they had some knowledge of, like, they had some intricate knowledge of the boats that we didn't have, and so but they had never had. I mean, the boats disappeared from practical use in their lifetime, so they never built them, and they wanted to revive that. So, but we had the sort of skills to sort of get that back up and rolling with them. And there's a lot of hand skills that they still had that were still live from doing other things because they still build cometics, which are the sleds, and they still build traditional fishing gear. And like the mechanical material skills required for kayak building is directly related to all the other skills that are still alive, clothing making and other practical elements of living up there in the north where you're not buying much, right? You're
Yeah.
building a lot of stuff out of whatever's around. So so we built a kayak with those guys. We led the first kayak project, and then we handed over the reins to them, and they led the second one. We built two kayaks, and between those two, we'd sort of worked out methods of construction that both aligned with the way we built and aligned with knowledge that they had about how the boats were originally built. And then we went back two more times to build with them. We did another project with multiple boats, and we were supposed to get in a whole bunch of um, Inuit leaders to collaborate. I'd like to be the sort of the clients. Like there was a premise to create a kayak building business up there, not with us being part of it, but for them to run it.
Hmm.
And the premise was that the elders would be the instructors, and they would have a client come in and build a boat with them, and you'd have another side business of adventure tourism there in which you take the boats out for a trip or something like that. I mean, none of that ever came to fruition, but
Mm.
the premise of how to build towards that was there. And so we were going to build six boats with clientele the second year, and most of that clientele kind of by the last minute fell away, unfortunately. But we managed to find stand-ins from within the community to to move ahead with the build and just it's a good experience. And so that was held in the first one was done in like the youth elder center, and the second one was done in like the gymnasium. So the whole community would come in and sort of watch what the goings on there. And yeah.
How did these experiences affect or change your business? Hey guys, Eric from the future here. If you're enjoying the conversation with Mark and you want more, there's an after show. Head on over to Instagram, follow the Craft and Business Podcast, shoot me a DM with the word nomad, and I will send you the after show. Send you that link. That's it. No strings attached, no emails, nothing like that. And back to the show.
Yeah.
How did these experiences affect or change your business? Or did they?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I suppose they do. They certainly give you some street cred.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been I ironically I went into like the boat building school in order to uh build it, like expand my repertoire. But doing this stuff made me sort of like the skin on frame
Ah,
kayak guy within my wooden boat community.
yeah.
And I didn't learn any of those skills at boat building school. Like all those skills are completely learned um, on my own through books and just practice and figuring stuff out.
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
traditional wooden boat building practices are almost very few of them apply whatsoever to the skin on frame boat building.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So certainly for a good while, skin on frame boats became, a pretty good way of making a living. I also
Mm-hmm.
did a lot of cedar canvas canoe restoration. That became another bread and butter thing. Um, the skin on frame boats has really fallen off the charts in terms of what people are calling me for. For a while, like that was we were doing I was doing tons of it, both here in Victoria and in Vancouver. But over the years, I stopped doing the canoe restoration because I got sick and tired of it. It was the value of the canoes doesn't align with the effort required to restore them. or rather, you need to have clients that are willing to spend the bucks. In fact, I had one guy that I did a canoe for who wants me to do another one, but I haven't touched those canoes in a couple of years now. And so uh, these days it's been mostly new construction. It's been the main thing. I haven't even had any repair work of much coming to me. And teaching has become a main thing. Like the skin on frame teaching was always sort of a main focus of the shop, but since I've stopped doing it in my own shop, now my teaching is all through other facilities that are outside of the shop. So in particular, the Cowichan Bay Maritime Society is the business or the outfit that I'm collaborating with on education right now.
So, at what point did you start integrating the YouTube channel and media into?
That was
Or
about
what?
eight years ago. I started the YouTube channel, and my plan had been to start getting into like the um, subscription platform education.
Okay, okay.
Uh, and I was
As in,
following podcasts that were banging on about that sort of stuff. Like the Wood Whisperer he was just sort of new, and he had sort of, in terms of the world of woodworking, he had sort of started that whole scene of having a separate user pay platform that you would go to and work on
yeah,
projects and learn and stuff like that. So I'd always intended to sort of start doing that, specifically because one of the podcasts I was listening to about doing this, they interview the Wood Whisperer, Mark Spagnoli, and that was a really good template. And he had gone from doing some YouTube stuff to getting sponsorship to starting the Wood Whisperer as a separate thing. And I started making videos with the idea that I would create my own courses.
yeah.
And I started YouTube with the idea that I would learn how to produce video in the process, which I needed to be able to create the courses. And I would also start building the audience that I could sell those courses to. And I have yet to ever make a damn course.
Really?
I yeah, I keep outlining what those would be, but it always felt like the I would front end load the volume of detail and effort required, and it would stop me in my tracks. I could never get past the sort of everything I felt like you needed to do at the front end to get to where the actual course happens. And so I ended up realizing that it's really not for me. I don't really want to run like this website that I have to think about nurturing constantly to keep it going, and dealing with lots and lots of people emailing me constantly. I mean, I got a Patreon page that is sort of that in a sense, and that's part of the financial structure under which I can produce these videos. But they're really easygoing, and mostly the Patreon page is my viewers' way of supporting me directly, more so than the ads generate, that the ads on the YouTube channel generate. And so, I mean, I keep checking in with them to see if they, want more interaction. And most of them are like, nah, we're good.
Oh,
Just
interesting.
keep producing the videos you're doing. We're happy with that. I do my best when I do produce a video and I put it up on my Patreon page. Like if you go to my Patreon page, there isn't a lot there that isn't available already on YouTube. But what I do is I write a little article that goes along with each video that expands on something in the video that in some way
Yeah,
that
that
might
makes sense.
connect a few dots or provide a few alternative approaches or things like that. So, and I try and keep that relatively short because I know there's only so much reading people are likely to do. And honestly, I have no idea if anybody even reads those articles at all. But anyway, that seems to be working. As much as I'd like to produce more exclusive content for the Patreon page, I just don't have the time for it because as it is, I'm sort of up at maybe 5 in the morning every day working on videos for the first till about, 8, 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning, and then transitioning over to building boats, doing the
Wow.
hands-on work for the rest of the workday,
Hmm.
and often coming down in the evening to do a little bit of something, either a side project that I've got going on that doesn't involve machinery and stuff like that. Like I've got a little skin on frame kayak model I got to do.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Or maybe picking away at the videos again, maybe just working on some thumbnails or whatever.
Yeah.
I try not to put in too much time in the evening because it's like there's only so much time you can work in the day and not make yourself crazy, right?
One of the hard things about being self-employed is giving yourself that time.
It is, yeah.
So what's
Yeah.
the breakdown of I mean, what percentage of your income is coming from the videos versus teaching versus custom kayaks
Right
or
now,
boats?
at the my taxes last session revealed that the video element makes up about a third, made
Mm.
up about a third of that year
Hmm.
between the Patreon page and the Google ads and a handful of just sort of on online sales that are like drawings and like plans and stuff like that through my website. I kind of lump them all together. Everything digital, I lump together into one
Okay.
category.
Yep.
Um, and teaching is a bit hit and miss depending on, some years teaching is like 50%, some years it's not. Last year was not. There was very little teaching last year. But it'll be different this next year.
Hmm. In which
So,
way?
well,
Just
I've got
more
a,
teaching?
I've definitely got one course lined up. So, in November of this year, I'll be teaching a traditional lapstrake course at the Couch and Bay Maritime Center. That's going to be a 2 week long course broken up into two 5 day work blocks. And in that, we'll be building a traditional lapstrake boat that's known as what we're calling a tie, which is it's this boat was designed and built by uh, a boat builder named Ned Painter up in the Campbell River region. So very recently, I went up to Campbell River to survey a couple of these boats that were in the museums up there, and I went up with Jim Tolpin. He's quite well
Mm.
known in the woodworking world
Yeah.
as an author, and Jim has always bandied about with boat building on the side, but never did it as a living. Did a little bit of boat interior work as a living briefly, but he's a real he really loves small wooden boats, so that's just sort of his kink, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so he called me up. He was interested in researching these boats, and it was just by coincidence I had already taken lines off one that I had in the shop for restoration, and he and I traveled together up to um, Campbell River. We stopped in at another boat builder's shop, Hillmark Boats, guy named Mark. Um, Mark had built some of these as well. And we went and took lines off the ones that were, or took details off the ones that were in the museums. Because Mark very graciously gave us a set of patterns that he had produced for his boats, his Thais. And along with the lines that I had taken off one that was in the shop, and we pulled a bunch of construction details off the ones in the museums. And then Jim and I got together in my shop and we lofted one out full scale and just tried to pull all these elements together to try and produce something that we thought was representative of the actual boats.
I do have a couple more
Yeah, yeah,
questions. I just wanted to kind of get back to the business side of
sure.
things. What's the future of your business look like?
Uh,
Where do you want to go? Do you want to do more teaching? Is it more custom work? Is it just kind of staying on the straight and narrow of what you're doing so far?
uh, you know, as much as I love building custom boats, at the same time, I am feeling like a bit like Greg Foster did in that I'm feeling like I'd like to be able to do it without the customer being front and center.
Greg Foster was the one that you talked about in the beginning with the
Yeah,
very decorative elfin
exactly. Now,
boats.
not that I want to do really decorative stuff, but I don't know. I kind of feel like I'd like to be able to sort of just do kind of build stuff on spec,
Yeah.
change up the pace. You know what it is? It's when you get someone's handed you a bunch of cash to produce something, and then there's there's pressure to generate a thing that you hope lives up to their expectations.
Mm.
And that's a heavy mantle, as opposed to producing a thing that you just feel is beautiful, and then someone comes along and sees it and says, oh, that's I love that. I'll take that off your hands. Sure, it's worth that, whatever that price is.
Mm.
Now, not that I have, now, what holds me back from just doing that is the market around here is not good for doing that sort of thing. This is Victoria, as much as the fact that there's water everywhere is not a good place to try and offload a wooden boat. Um, Even we've got a manufacturer of lobster fiberglass boats here called Whitehall
Oh yeah.
Reproductions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful boats.
yeah. And the price tag is as high as what any wooden boat builder would happily ask.
Hmm.
But he doesn't even sell them locally. His boats are mostly
Oh,
going south to the States.
really?
So uh, it's hard to find customers that have got the means to buy a custom built wooden boat and the desire to do so, to spend the money on something that you're not like I could build something brand new and get as a spec boat and get half as much as it took me to put into it in a price tag compared to having a client pay the full ticket to have that built. Right? That's the really awkward economics of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess the flip side is if you're going to try and do that, you've got to try and find a or produce a product that can keep that price down to something that's accessible to the widest possible audience, and that's really tough.
Mm.
That's really tough to do. So, what was the question?
What the future of
What's the
nomad
future?
boat building
Well, I
is.
don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I'm in my late 50s now, like 56. And so I'm starting to think about what retirement work looks like if there is such a thing, which there kind of isn't because there's no pension as a self-employed person. You just have to hope you can keep on going until you croak. Um, and my wife's pension certainly is not robust enough for us to both live high on the hog on. Maybe very frugally we could do that, but I mean there's an assumption that I'll keep on generating cash up until I'm pushing up daisies in some way. So I guess it'd be on one hand I like the idea of transitioning to content creation, although the effort required to do that as a full-time gig, to do all the, we'll say like all the meta elements required to like really make a living at it. I don't know that I've got that skill set or patience
Hmm.
or desire. I kind of feel like I'm kind of at my limit of what I can stand right now, which is, I actually don't mind the editing. I kind of like the creative process, except when things get really tricky because you've buggered up your footage and the sound is crap and you can't get rid of this clipping, or your stupid SD card just timed out and you couldn't tell because you kept talking for 20 minutes and your camera's already died on you because you can't see the stupid little screen from 10 feet away because your
Yep.
eyesight is trapped out. Like a million ways in which your best efforts are totally undermined by yourself. Anyway, so I like the idea of that in some ways. and maybe, but I don't know if that's really realistic. And building banjos is something I'm really into, or doing other string instrument stuff. I don't really want to try and make that a full-time gig, but I envision that as sort of a retirement era small money maker,
Hmm.
possibly. I don't want to try and be a manufacturer. Like, I don't want to switch gears and try and manufacture something different.
Have you come across Daisy Tempest,
Yeah.
I believe?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got quite an interesting business
Yeah.
around guitar making.
Yeah. Hats off to her. I mean, she's pretty young. She's in her early 30s, I think, and has managed to get herself a price point on her instruments that's respectable. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know she's not trying to bang them out cheap.
Yeah.
And she's managed to work underneath some other people in order to develop those skills. And she's great at the social media. She's
Hmm.
really good at it.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of feel like there's a generational difference that makes it harder for my generation to sort of fully pull it off, pull off content creation as a way of making a living.
Hmm.
And I don't quite know exactly what it is, but it's like you think you think the fact that I'm a generation that started using computers when I was about 12 years old, when they were first, like literally first introduced to the classroom. In
Yeah.
fact, I was like 12 and I was amongst a group of about 10 kids that once a week we were walked from our grade school over to the local high school where they had the first like computer lab set up, and they
Oh
would
my
have us sit
gosh.
down at these terminals and do a little bit of computery stuff and then walked back, right? And we were taught how to work with DOS and stuff like that in BASIC and things like that. But you'd think we would have a greater fluency with working with this technology than we do. But we don't.
Mm.
We're sort of
Ha-
stuck in the analog version of computers. Like, we never really quite crested the digital, the true digital version
Where
that
do I
my
put this
kids do.
floppy
My
disk
kids are
in?
like, it's like great. I've fully
Uh,
given up on trying to run the TV, drive the TV. Can't do it.
have you ever had sponsors on for any of the
Yeah.
videos?
I've had like a few different products, a few different companies that have provided product to me for free in
Hmm.
exchange for just, try it out, to review it, no obligations. Total Boat's been good about that, about providing some product. But now I've got currently have a paid sponsorship deal with West System Epoxies that's going to run for the next year. I'll have at least
Oh,
one West
nice.
System sponsored video coming out each month.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations on that.
There's no editorial oversight from them.
Hmm.
All they have to do is shoot the video their way, a few days before release for them to sign off on it. Um, and they might say, I think the last time they said capitalize West System in the title or whatever it was. So,
Okay. Has that created a significant bump to the
oh
revenue?
yeah, yeah,
Nice. Okay.
yeah. That's doubled the
Oh,
revenue
nice.
roughly.
Nice.
Not maybe
Okay.
not quite,
Wow.
but pretty close to that. But it's all a play off. It's wooden boat building is like you're a professional artist more than anything else. I think
Yeah.
for most people. Some people are more successful at it. If I worked on larger boats and had the facilities to do so, it I could probably justify making. I could probably be making more money, especially if I can concentrate my time and make it all billable. But
Hmm.
as it stands, I don't know. Between whatever level of organization I have and concern, or what the family life requires, it's kind of rare that I put in a full 8-hour billable day, even though I'm actually putting in like a 12-hour working day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the life of the self-employed.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm brutally honest with my when I'm filling out timesheets. I'm not. I don't. If anything, I shave back from the time I put on a timesheet rather than pad it out because I feel like I can't. I wouldn't sleep well if I didn't give customers full, full value for the time I'm putting in
Yeah.
or for the
Yeah.
money they're paying me.
Well, gosh, we've gone an hour and a half. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Reuten has been an incredible guest. Thank you so much. I've got one more question for our way out.
Hit me, Eric.
Um, what's that?
Hit me.
Okay. What is the one most important piece of advice you would give yourself when you were starting out in your business? Something that somebody else starting out in their business in craftsmanship can utilize to try to overcome some of the hurdles that you've had to overcome.
Yeah.
What advice would you
Okay.
give yourself?
That's easy. Perfection is impossible. So you shoot for perfect as best you can, and you settle for good enough when the when the pursuit of perfection seems uh to become too costly to justify. I think that's the best thing. Like your whatever you think is going to be your expectation of what you're producing is so much higher than what the customers is probably. So you do your best to satisfy your own level of perfection, and you realize that it's probably way beyond the customers. And and I say just be brutally straightforward with customers. Don't ever bullshit them. Just ask them. Uh, business should be you don't dance around stuff. Talk dollars, talk about the cost of things, ask them where they're at, ask them, do you want me to try and should I be holding back on my level of finish to fit a certain budget, or what's your budget, or find out what the parameters are in a straightforward way, and just try and be I've always gone with transparency. So, you know, keep timesheets, and if the customer wants to see them, show them the timesheets. Write everything down on them you can think of, and don't be greedy. But that's not what a good capitalist does. And I'm not a good capitalist.
That's why you're the nomad boat builder
I'm an
and
art.
not the nomad capitalist.
That's right. Yeah.
Mark, thank you so much for your time. If people want to find you, it's Nomad Boatbuilding, YouTube, Instagram. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, or my website, nomadboatbuilding.com. Yeah.
Excellent. And if they want to support you, you've got Patreon, you've got some products for sale on the website.
Yeah, there's not a lot. Mostly it's digital products like plans and things like that. But absolutely the best, if you can afford to throw me a couple bucks on Patreon, that's great. And I've got all the different tiers right down to, just a couple of bucks a month. Or even if you're just watching my YouTube videos and you see a tip, something that you think is can be useful, use that little super thanks, drop me $2.
Excellent.
That's, I always appreciate that too. Ongoing support's great, but I understand not everybody can justify that, especially if times are tough. But my attitude has always been like, if I pick up a woodworking magazine and there's one good tip in there that I think I'll use, I'll buy the magazine and say that that $10 for that tip is worth the money to put in my pocket and take away with me. So I can think of videos as the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I think this is going to be really useful for any listeners that are trying to start their own business in the trades. Well, we'll see you guys in the next show. And this is the end of the first interview for Craft and Business Podcast. Thanks again, Mark, for being the first willing victim.
Wow. I'm humbled, Eric. I hope I live up to the rest of the interviews you get. That's for sure.
It means a lot to me. Thank you so much, Mark.
You bet. All right. You take care.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked this one, you can click on here or here. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but there's another episode linked up here. It's another great conversation. And don't forget, there is an after show to this. Head on over to Instagram, shoot me a DM with the word nomad, and I will send you the after show, and I'll see you there.